On this week's episode of A Drier Dose of Disney, Jared shares his tips and tricks for dealing with motion sickness in the parks.
Welcome to another episode of A Drier Dose of Disney. I'm your host, Jared Drier, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking about motion sickness in the park and how to conquer that. And if you listen to our last episode, we did allergies in the park and talked with our friends Brett and Marissa, where we specifically talked about a peanut allergy and how you can avoid that in the parks. And we thought, hey, in the line of health and safety, let's continue with that series, and let's now talk about motion sickness in the park, because you're going to be experiencing a lot of different thrill rides and you're going to have potential motion sickness. And we want to make sure that you're having the best experience possible in the parks. So we wanted to give you some tips and tricks on how to avoid it and what rides could potentially cause it. So we're going to be going through a lot of different parks and a lot of different rides today and kind of the feelings that you're going to be feeling. Now, obviously, no, let's pause there, take that out. But before we get started, we do want to ask, wherever you're listening to this podcast, or if you're watching it on YouTube in the video format, go ahead and click pause and go down and click that subscribe button. It's totally free to subscribe to A Drier Dose of Disney, and we want to make sure you're getting this content delivered into your inbox every single week when we drop an episode. Second, if there are any tips and tricks like today when we're talking about motion sickness that save you money or make your life a little bit easier, we would appreciate some support over at Patreon. And our link is down in the description of this podcast or on YouTube in the description of the video. And you can support us there by throwing us a couple dollars as a one-time donation. Or if you want to become a regular subscriber on Patreon, you can contribute to us each and every month, and you're going to get some really cool perks in doing that. And we really just want to thank our supporters who support us over at Patreon. You guys are what keep this podcast going, and we really do appreciate it. Let's, though, talk about the different types of motion sickness that you could potentially encounter while you're at the parks. And let me start by saying that the difference in motion sickness that you can get between Disney and Universal is very different. Universal is way more aggressive, with probably the exception of one or two rides at Disney. Every single ride at Universal is going to have a little bit more of that visual and a G-force element that you're going to feel when you're riding the rides compared to a Disney ride. So there's a big difference there between the parks. Now, when you go to the parks, there are multiple ways people can get motion sick, and that could be anything from visual, which is what I usually suffer from the most. And that is when you're on a ride where it's 3D and there's a lot of movement on the screen and things are just getting thrown around. And we'll talk about a couple rides that are like that here in a minute, but that'll make me pretty sick. G-forces can get me as well. So when you're on a big roller coaster and you have a big drop, or you have a really high speed turn where you really feel it through the turn, that can also make me feel a little bit sick, but not as bad as the visual. And I recover from that very quickly. And then of course, the last one is spinning, which is a combination of the two, where you're going to be getting also that G-force feeling. It's going to push you back into your seat, but the room is going around, or the exterior is going around. And that's also a visual stimulant as well. So spinning can actually get people on both groups there. I will also say for myself, and I don't know if any of the listeners are like this, that I recover really quick from G-force sickness, meaning if I go on a roller coaster like the Incredible Hulk, and we'll talk about that in a minute, there's no question, when I come stumbling off the Incredible Hulk, I don't feel very good, but within about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm usually better and I can keep going. When I go on something that is a visual stimulant and I feel sick from watching the visual action within the ride, usually I don't recover as quickly. And the next time I go on a ride like that, it gets even worse much quicker. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. Maybe you recover quickly, maybe you don't. Those are all things to consider when you're going to go through your theme parks. Now, I want to take you to the next step and tell you that if you're going to do a marathon, and that's something that we've done quite a few times, especially down in Orlando. And by marathon, you're going to do park 4 days in a row or 5 days in a row, and you're going to knock out every single ride that you possibly can. And you're going from rope drop till as late as possible because you want to maximize and get the most out of your vacation. Know that you can start to suffer from theme park or roller coaster fatigue, meaning that after a couple of days, your body just isn't up for it much anymore. So if you are like that at all, or if you're worried about that, my one piece of advice would be to start with the universal parks earlier in the week when your body's a little bit stronger. That's because they are way more aggressive than the Disney ones. And then as you work your way through Disney, you can progressively go down in intensity as you go through the parks. And we'll talk you through what each park is like and what each ride is, but that may be a consideration for you. Now, if you go back in time, we did have an episode on crowd calendars, and we told you if you go to Undercover Tourist, you can check out what days are the most busy at different theme parks. And we do encourage you to do that. And that is something we still do today. However, if you are prone to motion sickness, I will say throw out the crowd calendar and just go in the order of the parks that will play to that theme park fatigue a little bit better. Like I was just saying, start with the Universal parks because they're a little more aggressive and your body's probably ready for it. And then as you go through the week, then I'd go to the Disney parks. And then I would start thinking about scaling down as the week goes on, just because your body's going to get more tired and you're going to be more prone to it. But if you do start with Universal, you're going to be in great shape. The reason I say you should go that route and think more about theme park fatigue versus the crowd calendar is with Disney, they max out the reservations almost every single day. So the crowd levels aren't going to be much different regardless of when you go during the year or regardless of when you go during the week. So know that for the most part, those 4 parks are going to be very consistent. Universal could fluctuate quite a bit, but honestly, the best day of the week to go there anyways is Monday. And that's towards the beginning of the week because most people are headed to Disney on Monday. So that's always a great way to start your vacation out on Mondays to go to the Universal parks. You're going to have lighter crowds and your body's going to thank you later in the week when you've done that huge long marathon. So just a couple tips and tricks there just to get us started. But let's talk through the parks, and I'm going to talk through all the different rides that could make you sick and why they could make you sick. And this will give you some tips and tricks depending on how you get sick. So if you get sick riding a spinning ride, then you may want to avoid some of these rides and I'll explain them to you. If you get sick riding a visual ride, then I'll explain those. And I'm going to explain there are different degrees of how sick you can get and how sick I get. And so I will talk you through personally what I experience when I ride each one of these. And then at the end of the episode, we have a I can do this all day tip of the day, which is awesome that you're definitely going to want to hear about. So definitely stick around for that. But with that, let's go ahead and start with the Magic Kingdom. So we're going to go at Disney first, and we're going to the Magic Kingdom, which is everyone's iconic, most favorite park. And there's a handful of rides that can make you sick. I will say this is one of the more mild parks as far as Disney's concerned. There's a couple other parks that do have more rides that are a little more aggressive, one that doesn't. But at the Magic Kingdom, there's a handful of them that can make you sick, starting with the Mad Tea Party. So the Mad Tea Party is your classic teacup ride that you can get into, and you can spin your cups as fast as you'd like. Now, if you go onto the Mad Tea Party teacup ride with your family, you can control the teacup a little bit and keep it from spinning too much. Just know that the whole platform is also going to be spinning. It's not super fast, but if you do control it, then the ride's not terrible and your kids may love the ride. Of course, if you grab a hold of that wheel in the middle and you really start cranking that thing, you're going to get that teacup spinning really fast. And of course, you're going to come off feeling pretty ill. So if you do not like spinning rides, I would say definitely stay away from the Mad Tea Party. That one, as far as spinning goes, is probably the most aggressive at Magic Kingdom. You do have a couple other rides like Dumbo or the Astro Orbiters and stuff like that that do go around in a circle, but they're not much worse than a carousel or more aggressive than a carousel. But if that makes you sick, then by all means, I would stay off of those as well. Mad Tea Party, though, is going to be the one that's going to get you the worst for spinning. Now, when you're talking about coasters and a lot of different types of motion, of course, you've got Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. That's a roller coaster that's moving quite a bit. Most people say it doesn't make them too sick because you're not doing many G's on that. But if you don't like roller coasters, that may be one I may consider skipping. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train is pretty mild. That one is less aggressive than Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. And my wife gets really sick on a lot of different rides, and she will ride that one every single time. So know that one's very safe, and you should do pretty well there. Which brings me to my last ride at Magic Kingdom that you may want to think about, and that's Space Mountain. Space Mountain is completely in the dark. It is a roller coaster. It doesn't have a lot of hard turns or a lot of spinning in there. There are a few times when you are taking corners in the dark, but I do know a lot of people that because it's in the dark and they can't have a fixed visual point that they can reference, it does make them sick. In fact, on our last trip, when we just went there for the art festival at Epcot, we were in line for Ratatouille, and there was a couple talking to us in line about Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. And the lady in the couple said that she did get sick on Space Mountain. And so we were telling her that you probably do not want to ride Guardians of the Galaxy, which we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. Space Mountain, though, can make some people sick. So food for thought there. I will say it's not a very aggressive roller coaster. I never get sick on Space Mountain. But if you have trouble on dark rides where if you don't have a point of reference, you get dizzy or get sick, then you may get sick at Space Mountain. But again, at the end, we're going to give you tips on how to avoid getting sick. Number 2, let's go to Epcot. And Epcot, hands down, has the 2 most aggressive Disney rides, both at Epcot. There is a way to avoid one of them and still have a great time. And so we'll talk about that here in a second. But first is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind that we were just starting to talk about. And with Guardians of the Galaxy, this is Space Mountain on steroids. It is completely in the dark. There are videos and really cool things to look at while you're going through. And that does help with getting a focal point and having somewhere to focus your eyes. But this ride, the cars actually spin as you're going through the roller coaster. And they don't spin like the teacup. They do have a gentle movement around to show you the action at different parts of the ride. But it definitely has a lot of G's. There are quite a few times when you're going in a circle on the roller coaster, looking at something, and you can just feel it sink into the back of the seat a little bit. So there's no question that a lot of people do get sick on Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. When I ride it, because it's done with the virtual queue today, which is probably going to go away here pretty quick, you can only ride it once a day unless you want to pay. So for me, riding it once a day, I'm fine. I will recover usually within about 20 minutes after the ride and feel pretty good going forward. But it does make me feel a little bit ill. I can tell you, I have seen people get sick on this ride. If you want to go online and read about it, there's all kinds of complaints out there about people that do get sick. There are trash cans after the ride. There is when you come over the stairs and come down, there's a whole garden area out there. And my wife, who won't ride this ride, will sit out there and wait for us to come off. And she has seen dozens of people come off sick and go throw up in the bushes. So do know that Guardians of the Galaxy can make you sick. Now, my brother-in-law went a few months ago and he did his virtual queue and he loved it so much he wanted to ride a second time and he paid for the individual lightning lane to go do it a second time. And doing so, he got very sick on his second go-around. He came off and said, I wish I wouldn't have done that. It was a great ride. He loved it, but riding it twice in the same day did make him very sick. So do know that ride can make you sick. There are quite a few people that do really well with it. My daughter's one. She doesn't have any problem with it whatsoever, but do know that ride can make you sick. So if you're worried about it, listen for our tip later in the video, but then also go check it out online. Second, the worst ride I've ever ridden that made me so sick it ruined my whole day is Mission Space over at Epcot, and that's on the orange track. Now, if you're not familiar with Mission Space, there are 2 tracks at Mission Space. And that is our tip on this one is go to the green track if you're going to get sick at all. We ride the green track. In fact, my wife rode it last time. She was so scared. She thought she didn't even want to ride the green one, but we went and did the green one and she loved it. My daughter loves it. I love it. We have a great time on the green one, but on the orange track, the way that this works is you go into a room. When you get ready for the pre-ride, they explain it all to you, but you're in a capsule that has 4 seats. They're hanging vertically down. And once you get in there, you get fully enclosed. And then what happens on the orange track is to make you feel the G-forces of taking off and launching in a rocket. The whole room, which is probably, I think there's 6 cars, 4 people on there, is spinning. So all 6 cars are spinning on one big, huge centrifuge. And they have the cars tilted back and they're spinning at the same time. So it pushes you back way far into your seat and makes you feel like you're getting a lot of G's through the takeoff. Then once you're in space and they make it go the other way so that you feel like you're in 0 gravity and 0 G, they then slingshot you around the moon to go to Mars. And in doing that, it takes off spinning again. And then it spins when you're landing on Mars and you're feeling the gravity there. So that ride has a lot of spinning. It makes you feel really sick. When they first opened it at Epcot, people were getting so sick they had to change it and do the green track as well. When you come off, there are trash cans after trash cans from the orange side, just because it is so aggressive. I would highly encourage you, if you get sick at all, do not ride orange on Mission Space, but green is really relatively mild. My wife, who gets sick on everything, loved it. She said she didn't get sick at all. That's the way you can avoid that one, but orange is highly aggressive. With that, let's go over to Hollywood Studios now. And at Hollywood Studios, there's a couple different rides here that you could potentially get motion sick on. This is probably the second most aggressive Disney park behind Epcot. And we're going to start with the Rock and Roller Coaster. So this is Aerosmith's Rock and Roller Coaster. It is in the dark. It does have a loop. It does have corkscrews in the dark. And like some of the other rides, it's tough to find a good focal point. Now, there is a lot of neon. There's signs everywhere that you can look at. That definitely does help. But this ride does have some G's. It is a more aggressive roller coaster. And as far as Disney's concerned, I would put this in its top 2 most aggressive roller coasters with the Incredicoaster out in California. So Rock and Roller Coaster being in the dark adds that element that it's a little bit tough to see what's going on. But Rock and Roller Coaster can make you sick. Now, for me, it doesn't make me sick. My wife has ridden it a handful of times. She does say she comes off sick every time. So she is no longer going to ride that anymore. I do think that's one of the most aggressive rides at Disney. So be warned that Rock and Roller Coaster can make you sick if roller coasters and dark things make you sick. Next, ironically, I do better on Rock and Roller Coaster than I do on our next ride, and that is Star Tours. And if you're not familiar with Star Tours, it's been around for a long time, since the 90s, and you get into this transport vehicle that probably seats about 30 or 40 people, and you have a single screen up front, and it's a simulator. So the whole thing's moving around. You're watching the screen, and they're going to take you on a quick little adventure through some random Star Wars places. And in fact, if you didn't know, every time you ride it, it's almost random every single time, because they have multiple scenes that you're going to go through, and they always rotate it. And it's always going to be a different experience every time you do it. So Star Tours is a lot of fun, but being in an enclosed space with a simulator is where I start getting sick. And you're going to hear that more on some of the other rides, especially over at Universal. And I don't love those. Now, that in contrast to our next ride at Hollywood Studios, which is Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, I don't get sick on Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. And I think it's because it doesn't move as much as Star Tours does. And I think they've done a lot better with the fact that when you're looking at the Millennium Falcon, you can see out of all the windows, and all the windows are playing the same video. And that definitely, I think, helps me, just gets me a little bit more spatial awareness to what's going on, where with Star Tours, you don't. You only get the one view right up front. Some people have asked about Rise of the Resistance, and does that make anyone sick? And there is a little bit of a simulator ride at the very beginning and a tiny bit at the very end. But I can tell you, my wife rides that, I ride that. Neither one of us ever get sick on that. So know that Rise of the Resistance is very safe for people that get motion sick. And it was voted the best ride in the parks by a poll that we did on Facebook. No, that's a great ride. I would never skip that one. So Rock and Roller Coaster, Star Tours, and then maybe Millennium Falcon, but that's about it. If you're curious about Slinky Dog Dash, that one's not bad. Alien Swirling Saucers does spin, so we're back into the teacup range there. A lot of people skip that anyways, but that's up to you if you want to do. I would compare it to the teacups. Next, let's go over to Animal Kingdom. At Animal Kingdom, this is the most mild park at all of Disney World. And that's ironic considering they do have a big coaster. They do have a big motion ride, and they also have a spinning ride. But I can tell you, we've been there 100 times. I feel better after my day at Animal Kingdom than any other park, though it is bigger and it is a longer walk to get through that park. So be aware of that. But let's talk through their 3 rides over there that could make you sick. And even there's a 4th honorable mention we'll talk about. So Expedition Everest, of course, is a roller coaster. That one's not too bad, except for one part. You do go backwards and it drops, and it goes through a pretty good turn when you drop. So you do feel a lot of G-forces on that. Every time I ride Expedition Everest, I do come off feeling just a tiny bit like that there were a lot of G's in that one turn. But honestly, within 2 minutes of coming off, I am totally fine after Expedition Everest. And then again, my wife doesn't get sick. My daughter doesn't get sick. It's just that one little turn in there gives you just a little bit of that stomach feeling on Expedition Everest. So know that most people do pretty well on that one. And then the tip we're going to give you at the end would totally take care of that at Animal Kingdom. Number 2 is Flight of Passage. And I've already told you, I get sick on those simulator rides. Flight of Passage, in my opinion, is right up there with Rise of the Resistance. It's one of the best rides at Disney World. It's one of my personal favorites. And ironically, I don't get sick on Flight of Passage. And I don't know if that's just because the screen is so big and so huge, and the fact that the Banshees that you're riding on don't move that much. You're not like doing huge dives or big turns. And obviously you don't feel the G's. So for me, Flight of Passage is great. Now, we did go once during COVID, and they had limited capacity in the park, and we were able to ride Flight of Passage, come off and go through the shortcut. and ride again as many times as we want. I rode it twice in a row. And on the second one, I started feeling it a little bit. And I said, okay, we've been doing the marathon. I'm going to stop. My daughter and wife went back for a third time and they were feeling fine. They even talked about doing a fourth. So know that if you did it repetitively, you could start feeling it. But normally the lines are so long for a flight of passage. Most people can't do it repetitive. So that's a great ride. Know that you're probably not going to get sick unless you get sick like at an IMAX. If you go to an IMAX movie and they show a helicopter ride and that makes you sick, maybe this one will. But I can tell you it's been fine for me and I do get sick from motion. So we do recommend flight of passage. Last on the list is Triceratops Spin. This is another one that goes around in a circle. Not super aggressive. It is more of a kid ride. But again, if spinning gets you just the alien swirling saucers or Mad Tea Party, that may be one I might skip. The last honorable mention, I've never heard of anyone getting sick on, but that's Dinosaur the Ride. You are in the dark. It is Indiana Jones style. It is moving around a lot. And it is, I will say that's the darkest ride, meaning lack of light. There's no light inside that ride hardly at all. It's closer to Space Mountain than it is to some other dark rides, but it does move around and you are driving around. You see the dinosaurs and stuff like that. That could potentially make someone sick, but I've never gotten sick on it and I've never heard of anyone getting sick. With that, now let's hop over to Universal because it is way more aggressive at Universal. Like I said, for me, I get motion sick with a big screen and with a lot of movement in the ride. So right out of the gates, Minions is terrible for me. I don't like the Despicable Me Minions. Escape from New York with Jimmy Fallon, I do not like, and I won't ride that ride. Simpsons, I won't ride that. All three of these are exactly the same. And then there's two rides, and one's at Universal, one's at Islands of Adventure, so we'll talk about the second one in a minute. But Transformers, the ride, is pretty similar in nature, where you're in a big car and the car's moving around, it's all in 3D. That one will make me sick. Now, I can usually tolerate one ride either on Transformers or on Spider-Man, which is at the other park. We'll talk about that in a second, but I can't do both on the same day. That one makes me feel too sick, but I do skip Minions, Escape from New York with Jimmy Fallon, and The Simpsons every single time. Still at Universal, Escape from Gringotts. This is an indoor roller coaster in 3D. You do have large screens. This one, I don't do so bad on. There is one part where the car gets hit by a giant and it spins around a little bit, but it doesn't spin a lot. So my wife doesn't like it for that reason, but I can tell you, I ride Escape from Gringotts every single time, and I do not come off that one feeling sick at all. So I will say that one's pretty safe compared to the other ones if you do get motion sick from a visual standpoint. The Mummy is a ride. It's a roller coaster in the dark. It does have a couple turns in there, and being in the dark, like Space Mountain or the Aerosmith Rock and Roller Coaster, it is tough to get your bearings. So you could feel a little bit sick in there. But again, that's one I ride almost every time. And I'm wearing my Mummy shirt today, and I can tell you I would ride it again, and it doesn't make me that sick. But it could make you a little bit sick. And then the last one is the Rip Rocket roller coaster up at the front of the park. That one does have a couple turns in it that do have some G's. More than that, though, it's going to shake you to death. This roller coaster needs to be updated and smoothed out. It is pretty shaky, but that one can make you pretty sick. So Rip Rocket roller coaster up front can do that. Let's hop over now to Islands of Adventure. And this is where, again, you're going to have some more intense rides. So Forbidden Journey. So Harry Potter's Forbidden Journey, where you go into Hogwarts Castle and you fly around. This one makes me really sick. And it's because the car is moving so much inside the 3D viewing that it's a double whammy for me. And that one gets me very sick, which is surprising when you compare it to some of the other rides out there. So I do skip Forbidden Journey now. I've ridden it probably 15 times, and now I'm at the point where it's just not worth it, and I let my daughter ride. And my tip there is if you want to wait in line with your family, when you get up to the very front, you can do child swap, which means you go into a room where they board and where they come off, and they can go ride and just pick you up on the way out. So that way you can all stay together. And I love that about Universal. And that's what we do. We'll go up through the line. My daughter will hop on. My wife and I go wait and child swap. She comes off 2 minutes later, and then we go on to the next ride, and it's a lot of fun. So Forbidden Journey is one that I will skip. Hagrid's Motorbike is a bigger roller coaster. It does have a couple parts where you go through some tight turns. The G-forces aren't terrible. I can tell you I ride this every single time, and it doesn't make me sick. Now, if a big roller coaster does make you sick, you may want to think twice about this one. But I can tell you out of the 3 big roller coasters at Islands of Adventure, this one is the most mild. Hagrid's Motorbike, I've never gotten sick on. My wife rode it once. She said it was enough for her. She didn't want to ride it again. So again, if you're sensitive to that, you may want to skip it. Right over next to that is the Velocicoaster. And this, in my opinion, is the best ride at Universal Studios Orlando. And the Velocicoaster is very intense. It goes very fast. It has a couple different corkscrews in it, a couple tight turns. You will feel the G's on this one for sure, but it is a very fun ride. I will tell you, every time I ride it, when I'm getting ready to get off, I'm sitting there taking deep breaths because I don't feel very good. But like most roller coasters, I'm able to get off, and within a couple minutes, I am able to recover pretty well. But the Velocicoaster gets me every single time. So know that when you're going to ride it, it's going to get you if you have any motion sickness issues. It just has too tight of turns, and you're going to definitely feel the speeds and the G's. But it is a great roller coaster. So I highly encourage you, ride it. Use our tip of the day to get through that one. Next on the list is the Incredible Hulk roller coaster. This one I actually think is a little bit worse than Velocicoaster just because it does have more loops and bigger turns in it. I will say that I come off feeling very similar to what I do at the Velocicoaster. And in fact, my daughter and I have had numerous debates as to which one's the better roller coaster. And I just think it's Velocicoaster because it's newer and it's smoother. The Hulk is also very smooth. It's an awesome coaster. It's very fast, but it is a little bit older. It's been there since the 90s. So I definitely think Velocicoaster gets the edge on the Hulk. But both of them make me feel about the same. So what I will say is I do not ride them back to back. I will ride one. We will make our way through the park. We will have fun. We will ride other rides. And then in a little bit of time, then I will do the other one. I'm usually fine when we do that, but I definitely do like our tip of the day when I'm going to Islands of Adventure for that reason. Which then takes me to the last couple ones. So the Storm Force Acceleratron over in Marvel Land. This is made after Storm from the X-Men, and she can control weather, which means she can control tornadoes. So she's going to spinny on this one a little bit. It's similar to the teacups. You're going to get that spinning sensation. So if you don't like teacups, I would definitely say avoid that one. And then the last one, also in the Marvel Island, is just like Transformers. That's Spider-Man. And you're going to be in this cart with a 3D screen around you most of the time where you're going to be moving around. And like I said, this one does make me sick. I can only do one a day, either Transformers or Spider-Man. And that's about it for me. I will, like I said, at Universal Studios, I'm skipping Minions. I'm skipping Escape from New York with Jimmy Fallon, and I'm skipping Simpsons just because those three are just a little bit worse than Transformers and Spider-Man, and it's just not worth it for me. Like I said, Universal is a little bit more intense. Those are the rides that you could be feeling it. So definitely think twice about them. What I recommend is if you're concerned at all, go online, watch a video. There's, of course, ride-throughs on every YouTube channel out there that will take you through these rides so you get an idea of what it's like and what you may feel like when you're done. So that takes me to the I can do this all day tip of the day. And today our tip of the day is an awesome tip of the day. And in fact, it is something that we didn't really get educated on until a few years ago when we went on a different trip to Hawaii. And that is taking medicines like Bonine or Dramamine. Now, I'm going to recommend Bonine over Dramamine. And the reason is Dramamine puts us to sleep. It'll knock you out. It's an intense antihistamine that also has the impact of not making you feel nauseous. And Dramamine, like a Benadryl, will make you fall asleep. Bonine can as well, but it's a little less intense on that side of it. So we do Bonine. But here's the trick. You want to take Bonine just before you go to the parks, which is what the case is going to recommend. It's going to say, please take this a few hours before you're going to start experiencing anything. Our recommendation is you also want to take it the night before. So you're going to want to get 2 doses in before you go to the park. So I always take it the night before we go to Universal Islands of Adventure, and then I take it the morning of, and then usually I'm in pretty good shape, and then I'm not feeling the rides nearly as much. I can tell you, I can get through all the Disney parks without taking this at all. But when I'm going to go to Universal, I do like to take Bonine the night before and the day of, and usually then I don't have much of a problem. My wife, who does get very motion sick, said that also works for her. And we've been on some cruises and she gets sick on the boat. So she will do the same when we go on a cruise, and she will start early and then take it every single day as well. The other thing that she found that works really well is called a relief band. And this is a band you can buy online that has electrodes on it, and you charge it. And it gives a little tiny trickle charge going through your system when you're out experiencing motion. And they say that works really well. I've never used it myself. She has said that it's made her feel just fine as can be on a boat ride, which normally would make her feel really sick. So I trust her judgment, and I will say that a relief band is also a great investment if you get motion sick. And I would definitely pick that up over even the medication, because she did say it works better than the medication. So with that, we hope we gave you some good tips and tricks today. If any of these are going to help you on your trip, support us over at Patreon. But we wish you a magical week as you're planning your next vacation, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.